This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
Well, here we are then with another Sunday night of Skip Barber action, and it's coming up to you here on the iRacing Esports Network, coverage brought to you by RaceSpot TV. It is, of course, the 2K World Cup, coming to you from Circuit de Catalunya. Oh, Barcelona it says there, but Circuit de Catalunya, and what a venue this is. Brand new to iRacing, this latest build, this latest season. It's a tricky track, it's got a long front straight, and it's a very technical middle and end to the sector, end to the lap, should I say. And well, we are looking forward to some excellent racing here today. Conditions, 22 degrees air temperature, that's 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 42 degrees track temperature, that's 107 Fahrenheit, partly cloudy skies. And these drivers are going to be taking on this challenge in these Skip Barbers. Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Paul Smith, and joining me in the commentary booth is Gary Weaver. And Gary will bring up the championship standings here, but it is it's Philip Bear leading this championship, but it's not done and dusted quite yet.
And championship is not quite over. It's still Julian Offret, who's just around the strike zone essentially to getting into that first place position, while Philippe Bear has been pretty dominant for the most part. Julian Offret has also been lurking for the most part, the better part of the season, ran into bad luck occasionally, but he's still hanging into that fight. And don't count Diogo Francisco or even Greg Zietz, who are even about 4 or 5 points at least just within Julian Offret himself.
Yeah, it's really close, that battle for second place. Don't forget Sasha Gall as well. 219 points, only 9 points off of Julian Offret. So that is the battle for second place. Looking down a little bit, Tom Tran, Simon Edwards, Gonzalo Calvo, Johnny Gwindy, and of course Anthony Catt rounding out the top 10 of your championship standings. But Gary, we're into qualifying here. 5 minutes and 1 lap only to set yourself a qualifying time, and the fastest man in practice was Greg Zietz, who we're going to have a look at now.
I'll take a look and see how Greg Zietz can take to this track, and this is basically going to be only one attempt for some of these drivers. You see Greg Zietz really warming the tires, and I think only we saw at least at one point back in the New Hampshire, I believe, Oval. I believe that was last season, actually, where I believe it was Johnny Gwindy, where he was warming up the tires so much that he actually spun out. So want to make sure that you don't do that, at least even during here on this out lap, or even the, what's it, pace lap, but that's actually for oval courses. So for Greg Zietz, he's going to have to be careful, and pretty much anybody else who really wants to warm up these tires. And yeah, it's just really a one attempt, because it takes 2 minutes and at least, let's see, fastest time, 2 minutes 4 seconds to just get around here. So it's going to be a really kind of a stressful situation here for some drivers.
Yeah, you don't want to be hanging around taking too much time warming up the tires. You've basically got just under 3 minutes to get around this lap, this warm-up lap. As you see, he's really putting the energy into those tyres, and that's the thing, of course. This is the updated tyre model here on iRacing on the Skip Barber, and you really have to get the temperature, not just the temperatures, but also the pressures up in those tyres as well to really make it work and really give you the grip that you need. But Greg, he's got a minute, well, just under a minute now to get to the end of this lap, which isn't that far away. And he'll be now focusing. It's all about the exit out of the chicane that's coming up right here. Once he goes through this left and right, he needs to be absolutely on it for the start of his lap to carry the time. And here he comes then, start of his lap. As he comes out the final corner, don't run too far wide. There's nowhere near going off the over the curbs there, and he's starting his lap now. So just got 2.5 minutes, one lap to set this qualifying time. What can Greg do here as we come on down into turn number 1 there? Can hear him really changing down the gears through the right, through the left. Gary, we've got a great view now to see him come through this long sweeping turn 3. Really tricky corner this, it's so easy to run wide.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be throttle here that matters for sure, and that's going to be thing to really look out for is throttle control, and the fact that you just have to be really careful in some corners where it's easy enough for the car to just one step out, and at least for the back end to really lose a little bit of grip and become a little bit tail happy. But you just have to hope that throttle control really would matter in some of these long sweeping corners for sure. But Greg Seats looking so far so good, hanging on to this Skip Barber very well.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on the left hand side for the lap times of the screen. They'll come up as they come across the line. A couple of people did start their lap before Greg, so there'll be a couple of lap times come up as long as they're valid lap times. We're heading down now into the hairpin. There's an overtaking opportunity here in the race. Get your braking right, clip your apex, get on the power nice and early. You've got to carry the speed in this car. Of course, the not most powerful car in the world, but right now he needs to make it every bit count for him. Can let it run out wide there, use as much road as possible to open up that right hander, get it over to the right hand side, onto the brakes, left over the curb, right over the curb. Don't hit the sausage curbs because they will damage this car. Through the final corner, what's Greg going to do now? The first few lap times coming in. Gwindy, the 2:05.1. Greg across the line, 2:05.4, so he's slower. And he's second place, 2/10 down. Rest of the lap times coming up on board now. What can we see? Simon Edwards is enough a driver who's going to come through here towards the end of the lap. We'll stick with him here, see what he can do. A man who's in the top 10 of the championship, runs it out wide. And he's run out of time. And that is the trouble. Your championship leader was another man who ran out of time here. So let's give you your starting grid here then. And it's going to be Johnny Gwindy then on pole position. Sasha Girl in second place by 1/10.5. Greg Seats, as we saw, third place. Then Julian Offray in fourth. Third row of the grid is Andy Catt and Gonzalo Calvo with Carl Dronk and Gustavo Conde. Francois Boulian and Neil Kemp rounding out your fifth row with Chris Malcolm and Pakilis Antonopoulos. Oh my goodness, I'm
Adonopoulos.
Yeah, that's the one. Ronan Griffin and Joe Totis with Andy Witt and Philip Leibert. There you go, championship leader down in 16th place. Rest of these drivers, no time. Simon Edwards, Tom Tran, John Solet, George Matashitsky, and then your final two drivers, Rob Adams and John Orkin, as your drivers now heading onto the grid for the start of this one. 24 laps for these drivers, and Gary, it's because I'm looking at Greg's name. What are we thinking then for this one? How do you think they're going to get on here today in this race?
Oh, I don't know. It's a really large track, and like you mentioned, the front straightaway, this is going to be a major passing zone, and I would not be surprised if we see multiple drivers try and drag race down to the start finish line here in these, at least in the final few laps. But hopefully we won't be seeing anything too major. But turn 1 with that hard, basically 90-degree right-hand turn, going to be something to really look out for here on this opening lap.
Okay, well, the engine's revs rise. Getting set for 24 laps. Away we go. The green flag is in the air. Straight away going on the defensive is Johnny Gwendale coming across. That might have harmed his start just slightly as they're heading down into turn number 1. The slipstream coming into effect already. We're going to go 3 wide, are we? Into turn 1. No, not quite, but 3 wide for the third place. Through turn 1 they go. A little bit of a touch there between your front two. Everybody else makes it through here. That's a good clean start for them then. Running out wide though, your pole position man, Gwindy, he's dropping down the order. He can't get the power down. I think he's got damage here.
Might have a little bit of damage. Definitely not. Yeah, he actually might have a little bit of damage. He's still trying to at least hang on to whatever position possible as there's a spin in the back and multiple cars involved.
Yep, there's multiple car collision there and even more carrying on there. It's not gone well for them in turn number 4. We'll try and get a look back at this just very briefly. Looking from above, you want to look for that green and yellow car on the inside into turn number 4. I saw that car out of control then, so on the brakes. Oh, he lost it on his own, then there's a crash further back. All manner of shenanigans going on there.
Yeah, it was Lebert and Edwards both had made a little bit of contact, and then it was just a chain reaction from there. I think Simon Edwards is slowing up for those 2 cars in front of him, but I don't think Philippe Lebert really knew how much reaction time that would take, so unfortunately that led to that incident there.
As we're coming through towards the end of the first lap then, these drivers working their way through. And can they really get this queue of cars through here safely now through the chicane? There is an opportunity there to be had if you can take it, but really this is split up your field now. You've basically got the first 13 all together, and then the rest of the field are just split apart. But the battle for the lead is going on, and here comes Greg now. To the inside, Johnny Gwindy is on pit road. That pretty much confirms to us then that he had damage from that contact between him and Sasha Gall.
And it's really unfortunate for Johnny Gwindy, especially with kind of how this season has been going. He's been doing great, I believe, last season. He actually, I believe, won at least a couple of races, but definitely not the best way to start out this race, especially at a large track like this, because, well, draft is pretty heavily relied on here around this track.
Yep, certainly is, as the leader's still carrying on through turn 2. Have a look on board then with Sasha Gall down into turn number 5, this hairpin. Important to get your run out of this corner here, because you've got to carry the speed all the way to this chicane, which is coming for a really fast chicane this as well. Dab of brakes, get the front end in over that curb, running out wide, don't touch the sausage curb on the right, and then steep uphill. See, using the grass there on the left hand side, not ideal to be doing that, but these drivers using every inch of the road here, and that's what you have to do with this Skip Barber car. It's a momentum car, isn't it, Gary? You've really got to try and keep this car going as fast as you can.
Yeah, with this car and the slipstream, I keep harping back onto that, sounding like a broken record. But I mean, it's just how this track is really going to be treating these cars. But that momentum will definitely play a key factor into the rest of this race, as well as the fact that, again, some throttle control for some of these corners as well, where you have just long sweeping turns. But I mean, as much momentum as you can get with at least a full tank. I mean, for pit stops, that's going to be something else to look out for, because expected pit stop windows are lap 4 to 10 and 14 to 20, so at least 2 pit stops expected. And while using this draft is something that you're really going to have to utilize, as Sasha Grohl is utilizing that right now, getting on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, I should say, of Greg Zietz, gets into the lead and immediately falls back into single file.
We're going to be seeing this all the way through this race if they stick together. and if the other drivers can keep in the draft pack, then they will be benefiting. One thing that they will be benefiting from, of course, is a little bit of fuel saving staying in the draft. And if you're at the back of this queue of cars, which is what Calvo is right now, you're getting the benefit of all those cars giving you a draft here. You can maybe eke out a lap, maybe 2 laps of fuel here.
And if you stay behind and really not make any passing opportunities early on and just kind of let the race play itself out, then yeah, you'd definitely be in the good for fuel, because, well, the longer you stretch out the fuel, of course, the more you have. But at the same time, that comes at a little bit of a disadvantage for saving as much fuel as possible, because if you save enough to the point where somehow you're the only person on pit road, that's where the disadvantage comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. You lose that draft, you lose that speed. Look at Seitz then, getting it loose out of the right-hander, headed in towards the hairpin. No moves being made here. And quite frankly, these drivers, they'll just be, they know each other so well in this series. They'll just be working together, working to keep rotating between the front two here, trying to keep this pace up, because I don't want anybody else to be catching up and becoming involved in this and having all sorts of shenanigans happening here.
As much as everybody knows each other here, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody wanted to say, well, you know, I kind of want to shot this position, so I'll maybe, at the risk of messing up this little draft thing, I'll see if this attempt at passing can work. Or if it does, then it works, but if it doesn't, then that driver would know what not to do and what can and can't work, especially at this track, as it looks like the 74 of Greg Zietz will try and pass on the right-hand side again, just gets by the 17. Entering turn 1. That was a little bit closer than before than the 17 had made, so a little bit of a late run, but we see that sometimes that can play off into a very good favor.
As we look back then, you can see the menacing sight there of Sasha Gall behind. We're on lap 4 of this race, and well, you don't really need that graphic up to say how close he is there as they get close. Once again, the graphic I do want to bring up is that one right there. Sasha Gall, the previous lap, was 0.4 of a second faster. But you can see how that basically just switches between the two of them. Oh, running out wide into the gravel there slightly was your race leader. He's pushing it, is Greg. He's really trying to make a breakaway, but it's not working with that draft being so strong in this car.
It's really not going to work even at this track, because, again, it's so large. So there's really not much. Again, it's just the draft. Everything goes back to the draft here in these cars. You can throw these cars around. You can have a massive slipstream and use the draft to its advantage on most tracks that we've been to. So this is just one of those tracks where you can try as hard as you can to make a breakaway and make a pass to the inside, as the 13 gets, or the 33 rather, Julian Offret had dived into Anthony Katz inside. Made the pass work a little bit. It seemed to be a little bit late, but Anthony Katz, unsurprisingly, trying to look back to the right-hand side, but it just doesn't work. He doesn't have, again, the draft.
But that's the first time we've really seen anybody in this front pack making any moves into that hairpin. As we come out of there, and the pit stops are starting to be made. The two teammates jump on pit road straight away. So here we go. The first people to blink. Gall and also Offret down pit road, the 17 and the 33. Of course, there are other people who have made pit stops because of damage in this race. So these are the first two of the scheduled pit stops here. Be interested to see what sort of pit stop times we're looking at here for the refueling. They won't be taking tyres in this, it's just purely fuel. Away you go again, 9.8 seconds, 9.9 for Sasha Gall. So within a tenth of each other, they're the two teammates, but they're the first ones to blink there. Do they feel that they can work together here, Gary, because the both of them are teammates, use that draft between each other and try and pull themselves forward?
And definitely be worth working together. There's absolutely no benefit whatsoever to really working against each other, especially after you both pitted at the same time, as well as the fact that, I mean, really no benefit to it aside from slowing you and possibly some others down. But for Greg Zietz, on the bright side for him, he's gotten that breakaway that he's wanted, but it's not really much of a gap, about 1.3 or so seconds And that's just a matter of time. We have another maybe about 6 or so laps before this pit window really ends. So I'm wondering if we're going to see at least somebody end up pitting alone.
Well, is Greg going to react to that pit stop then of those two and maybe make it as on this lap? Or is he going to try and keep it out there and stay out for as long as possible? This is where the strategy comes into play. And you look at the bigger picture, you look at it and see what's going to work, what isn't going to work. And as I say, the experience that these drivers have in this series is Cat running out wide through the right-hander, and he's really wild through the chicane as well, and he's going to come into the pits now. So Anthony Cat is the next one onto pit road here in this race. So end of lap 5, Anthony Cat's made a pit stop, but their seats out front here. No worries as the two behind, Calvo and Dronka, they just change positions for second and third.
And that just extended the gap a lot more for Greg Zietz from Anthony Cat going to pit road. So I don't know. Greg Zietz has a lot of space to really work with if he does want to go to pit road, but does he really want to go to pit road this early on? That's really the question. He's got the space that he's kind of been working for, but at the same time, as Anthony Cat is exiting pit road now, you see Gonzalo Calvo and Carl Tronke, it's basically 2 against 1, so those two could possibly work together and catch up to Greg Zietz if none of these top 3 really pit in the next couple of laps.
Anthony Cat, 10.4 seconds compared to 9.8 and 9.9 for Frey and Gall, the 2 drivers that were in front of him. The 2 teammates working together here, and be interested to see what this lap time is like for them. I can tell you that your race leader is currently doing, his last lap was his fastest lap, a 2 minutes 4.2. In fact, it's the fastest lap of the race. So Greg right now, he's in a good position. He's not drafting anyone behind him. He can just keep his head down, concentrate on what he needs to do. And this is what you want as a leader. You want to have a breakaway and just not have any pressure on and just focus on what you can do best.
And focusing on that best is something that will definitely have to play into effect, especially, you really don't have to check the mirrors as often, but at the same time, when you're not seeing somebody in your mirrors for a very long time, you're expecting somebody to be right up against the rear wing, as it looks like the top 3 stay out for the time being. You expect somebody to be up on that rear wing, and for Greg Zietz, he's probably double checking the mirrors a little bit more than often because he doesn't have anybody there. So that means he might be looking a little bit more often to see if these the next 2 runners are really trying to catch up at all or catching up in any way.
The current battle for 4th place, Francois Bouillon, Gustave Conde, and also Neil Kemp. This is 4th, 5th, and 6th as they head on through turns 1 and 2 into 3, and you can really drift your car if you want to have a bit of fun in this car. You can sort of slide, do a 4-wheel drift through turn 3 here, really long radius right-hander, and into the hairpin here on the brakes. Julian Frey, look at that lap time, top of your screen, 2 minutes 3.9, fastest lap of the race, and that was one of the 2 drivers who battled with your race leader early on in this race. So Gary, the long game, we're going to have to wait and see how this pans out towards the end of the race, but right now Frey and also Gall have got some good pace.
They've got that pace pretty much down and set to what they're really used to. As you see John Gindy and Chuniski, their position changed as John Gindy had actually made it past on the left-hand side just in front of at least a little ways in front of Gourlay and Alfred. So a bit of a quick pass for Johnny Gindy by the 811 machine for the time being.
Johnny's desperately trying to make up for the damage that happened on lap 1. Your pole position sits at up to 11th then in this race, but he'll be disappointed with what happened at the start on lap 1, and he's really going for it. He's battering that car up over the curbs. He's not treating it gently. He's giving it everything as they carry on down the start-finish straight for another lap. And your leaders still staying out. They're not making any pit stops yet, as we'll look back at that battle for 4th, 5th and 6th as well. In fact, look at how close they are here on the draft. Not making the move though, Conde. A little bit of fuel saving going on here perhaps, and thinking I can get the move made in the pit stops.
Bit of a very interesting move as you saw him peek down to the a little bit different line, I should say, being run by Francois Boulian, but Conde doing actually a very smart move, just waiting and possibly either just saving fuel like you mentioned, or even trying to maybe pressure at least just a little bit, getting Boulian's head, saying, no, why is he not making the move when he does have space to do so? Maybe playing a little bit of mind games in the process.
As they head on through into the hairpin, turn 5. Getting the power nice and early out of there. See the rev counter going up, off throttle, through the left and then the right. That yellow sausage curve does unsettle the car, so you want to try and avoid that, especially with this car. Seeing how fragile the suspension can be. It's just the merest of contact. But these three, they're going to stay as they are. Dronke is pretty close in second place. Your race leader, by the way, his last lap was a 2:03.8 compared to Sasha Goll, who did a 2:03.7. So only a tenth of a second faster from Goll compared to your race leader. But we've got to keep an eye on if these guys come on down pit road. If you're the race leader, you try and leave it as long as possible, and they're staying out another lap here.
And they do have until at least expected lap 10, but I would not be surprised if they tried to at least split this 2-stop race into 1-stop race at most. I mean, if you could make the, if you could make it to at least coming to lap 13, if you can complete lap 12 in pit road, then in that case you kind of be guaranteed to really make it to the end of the race. But at the same time, I don't know how really, how much long these cars can really stay out. So we'll have to see if anyone can really attempt to stay out until that 12 to 13 lap point of this race.
Well, don't forget that these cars, they've got a limited fuel tank size. They're only allowed 40% of the normal capacity for fuel in this Skip Barber, and that means that they've got to be frugal. And so if any one of these drivers is like me, not the most frugal of drivers, so lead right foot for myself. But these drivers, there's a reason why they're racing this championship, is because they are that good. Through the hairpin, this battle for 4th place still ongoing, and Boulian right now is still out at the front of this one. Not coming under, well, they are under pressure, but not really having any moves made, because the two cars behind of Conde and Keb want to stay there.
And kind of staying there would also be a good thing, as well as the fact that, well, it wouldn't really be worth trying to make an attempt to pass, but for most of these drivers, it will be definitely worth at least trying to just stretch out this fuel run as much as possible. But Neil Kemp here has also been kind of just hovering in the back. He hasn't really done anything for the moment. He's just sitting there just watching this all happen in front of him, probably thinking about when he wants to pit next.
Race leader into the chicane at the end of the lap, and it's going to head on to pit road, so lap 9. That's a good point to get to. Lap 9, lap 18. If you can split it up like that, look at that. Look at that. On the brakes, all 4 locked up. As your 2nd and 3rd come onto pit road, Conde stays out. So that's that fuel saving that Conde was doing right there. Stays out of pit road, but we've got a pit party going on right now. So drivers coming down pit road. We're looking down the pit straight because we want to keep an eye out for Affray and also for Sasha Goll as well. Sights 15.9 seconds on pit road. Affray and Goll, they're coming through. They're side by side with each other down the pit straight. There they are. They're coming past your camera now. So they're into effectively race lead. And there's Sates then Seitz is behind Andy Cat as well, but of course, not Andy, Anthony Cat. Let's give him his proper name. Those drivers, of course, had a shorter pit stop than Greg, and the rest of these drivers here are pitted on that lap. So they now have got to really work this strategy and make this work, because they'll have to make a longer pit stop at some point.
I think a few of these drivers have already made that long pit stop already, because I'm looking at the pit stops now. The only few drivers to really make at least a single-digit pit stop in this sense were Sasha Gorley and Julian Alfred, both 9.9 and 9.8 seconds. Everyone else who just went to pit road, at least 10.4 to 16-second pit stops.
Well, Anthony Cat behind pitted on the lap after Gall and Affray, so he was on the 10.4 then. So it's the drivers from seats down who have pitted on this last lap, all around that 15-second marker. So these drivers here, they've got the longer pit stop coming up for them. They've got let's call it about a 5-second lead over Greg Seitz. So your long-time race leader has got that much gap to catch up, and that's about what the difference is in the pit stops there.
That difference in pit stops will be absolutely massive, and well, that's going to be the question of how much space is there between Gourlay, or should I say Offret and Condi. That's what we'll find out, as they will go side by side and see the rest of the top three going into a pit road, and there's a 16-second pit stop for Gustavo Condi. So that fuel saving might have actually played into a little bit of effect just to pit that soon. Or that later, I should say.
I was going to say 1 lap later than Seitz then. Slightly, fractionally longer than Seitz. So, yeah, that could come into play a little bit later for him. But if you can fuel save like that, then you've got a great opportunity towards the end of this race here. But your two race leaders, they're together, they're teammates, they're working together with each other, and right now Sasha Gall is behind his teammate Affray as they head on up towards the chicane. Quick look at the positions gained and lost. That's not right. That's with the drivers coming onto pit road. So we'll have to wait until the end of this lap for that graphic to catch up with us here, because Antonopoulos, he was up 10 places when he was in second. Well, he's back down to 10th place after making his pit stop. 17.9 seconds for him, by the way. As up over the curb, that 33, sort of Frey getting it up over the sausage curbs. But two very clean looking cars, no damage, no front wing damage, the telltale signs of sort of little bits of contact with either other cars or track furniture. So these cars absolutely as stock as they come out this final corner. 0.3 of a second between them. We'll probably see them slipstreaming past each other once again with the draft and making their way past here, which is what will happen right now, as there goes the organised overtake. So they're just working together, doing that bit of fuel saving between each other, and also trying to keep that lead at the front going. As 2:03.4 for Sasha Gall. That last the lap before, that lap didn't count as a fastest lap, even though it was a 10th faster there, Gary.
It's really unfortunate that somehow that did not count.
Probably got a 1x somewhere. Probably ran wide somewhere and picked up a 1x.
More than likely. I'm just double checking as well for my side from what I'm seeing. Yeah, so it's a little bit weird in its own right, but nothing too major at least.
Gustavo Conde, we saw that he was doing the fuel saving, is behind Neil Kemp. Now, Neil Kemp was the man who was behind Conde in that little gaggle of cars that we were looking at earlier on. And right now, Condé, with that slightly longer pit stop, has put him behind Kemp. But quite frankly, if you're Condé, you want to just stay there because it worked out from last time with the fuel saving. Well, he's got a bit more fuel saving going on here now, Gary. So in ninth place, we've got the final pit stops coming up soon. And the next sort of, well, the window will open, what, lap 16 or so?
14.
14. Thank you. I'm glad someone's paying attention.
You were 2 laps off. That's not too bad.
But, you know, right now, I mean, you look at this. Condé, he came in on lap 10, end of lap 10. So coming at the end of lap 20, potentially. You only have to top up 4 laps of the fuel. So it's not that much. That could be a really quick pit stop for him if he can do the same fuel saving that he did the first time.
And that wouldn't be too bad at all, especially since the fact that, I was going to say something that I completely lost it. Something about having about 14 laps for some reason, but in the event of thinking that, I realized that most drivers pit within the top 10, or within 10 to 11 laps, so really, nobody's really going to be able to make it unless you somehow run half throttle the entire way throughout this run, and you're also lucky enough to really be behind somebody as well in the process, so it's a little bit of a semi-win-lose situation if you do somehow attempt trying to save fuel at half throttle around this, again, insanely large racetrack here, so that's something to just look out for, and we'll see if anyone can really try and stretch it out maybe to the end. But the worst thing that could happen is that you stretch it out to at least lap maybe 22 just past the pit window, and the next thing you know, you pretty much have no choice to come into pit road with 2 laps to go.
Of course, this track is a 2.89 mile long circuit, so it is a large, as you mentioned, a large track for these cars. But for these skip barbers, it gives them an opportunity to really stretch their legs here and really get up to VMAX, up to the maximum velocity that these cars can run. So it's a great track for these cars, but it's also quite a technical track as well, as Condé just runs wide over the curb and over the gravel. But it's a great technical track as well, so you've got to be really adept in this car to be able to carry the speed through those technical corners.
And carrying that speed is something that really matters as well, especially even if you're behind somebody as well. That's going to be a little bit more of both an advantage and disadvantage because, well, you do have a little bit more speed, which is, of course, welcomed by anybody. You get a little bit more speed going into that technical corner, a little bit more than you'd really expect, possibly, especially if you're running on your lonesome, so you don't really know how much speed that you'd have to carry going into the corner, at least going into the braking zone, because, well, at some point you'd have to back off a little bit earlier on just to make sure that you don't run into the person in front of you, or in this case of Greg Zietz, try and brake a little bit later and catch right back up to the back bumper of Anthony Catt.
Yes, Anthony Catt right now ahead of Zietz. Catt was one of those 3 drivers who took the quicker pit stop on that first stop, pitted early, put the short stop out of the way, going for the longer stop in the second pit stop here. Zietz, however, went long in his strategy on the first stint. You see that lap to the gap to the leader, it's 4.6 seconds. It has reduced on this lap, and really, if he could keep that below 4 seconds, he's got a good opportunity of, when those pit stops come about, coming out into the race lead here.
Hopefully for Greg Zietz that can play out into his favor, especially if he might try to undercut or even overcut, but his best bet will be, at least at this point, with the pit window being open, he might be able to undercut, but that just depends on how long everyone else's pit stops are, and that also depends on the line that some other drivers run. As Anthony Catt went wide, Zietz looked to the left-hand side, but you saw him visibly back off, saying, well, you know what, it's not exactly worth trying to take that opportunity right now.
The 2 race leaders, they're on lap 9 of their stint now, looking towards lap 10. The pit window will be open this time by, if you're making your longer stop. Anthony Catt down pit road. as are your race leaders. So the two teammates onto pit road now. This is the crucial stop here for them. You want to be looking at a pit stop of around 15 seconds or so. They want to try and get it below 15 seconds, but they need to absolutely brim the fuel tank here. Let's bring up the pit stop time then on screen. 10 seconds past Sasha Gall, waiting patiently, revs the engine, away they go. 16.1 and 16.2 seconds for the two of them. Whereas Greg Seitz was a 15.9 on his first stop, which was his long stop. So Seitz right now, he wants to be looking at around about a 10 second, maybe even a 9.9 second pit stop, and he could be getting out in front.
And that's all that really matters now, is the fact that he just has to get not exactly a perfect pit stop really, but more perfect fuel stop in this case. But he also has to remember that pit entry is that's an interesting pit entry that I've seen for sure. You can carry all the speed possible, but you have to slow down right up to the last second. So pit entry is really going to be key for Greg Seitz if he does decide to go pit road this time around.
I'm not sure if we'll see him on pit road this time around. I think he'll wait.
He might try and stretch it, yeah.
Yeah, he'll wait maybe 1, maybe 2 laps, and then make it. But of course, you've got to remember, when it comes to a fuel formula where you've got these fuel stops, you want to go as long as possible, because the lighter the car is, the faster it'll go. And in this Skip Barber, with it weighing about 3 pounds, the weight of the fuel has a huge effect on the speed of this car.
The thing is, you mentioned staying out as long as possible. This time around, he'll come do his 6th lap on his stint, and compare that to the, plus 3 laps, coming up to 9 laps that your front 2 runners had done, where it was, whose names had somehow slipped my mind for some reason.
Efrain Gall.
Thank you. I was looking. I knew they were there. I just didn't know for some reason. Thank you for that, though. But yeah, Efrain Gall, they both had 9 lap stints, coming to at least about 10. So if Greg Seitz can at least match that or just barely surpass it, then he might be able to also come out in front just enough to make it to the end.
We'll have a look at your standings as they are right now. Of course, pit stops are ongoing right now. That pit stop window is open, so these will change. It is Greg Seitz in the lead ahead of Gonzalo Calvo, with Carl Dronke in 3rd. Francois Bouillard in 4th place, ahead of Neil Kemp. So has made it ahead of Neil Kemp, and look at that, 2-second gap now between those two. So that's broken away. Gustavo Conde right behind there with Johnny Gwindi, the recovering Johnny Gwindi, in 7th place. And then do you know what? When I get a name and it doesn't work in my head, for the rest of that broadcast, it never works. So Pericles is in 8th place.
I mean, that works. I was the same way. I had no idea how to pronounce his last name the first time I saw him. I was thinking, oh gosh.
I've had it in a previous broadcast where I knew what the name was, but my brain just wouldn't let me say it. And as soon as you do it and you realise it's wrong, you just keep on tripping up over it for the rest of the broadcast. So I do apologise. But we'll carry on here, and it is your battle between Kemp and Conde. Although, as we mentioned before, Conde stayed behind in the first stint. And he's going into the pits now. So, only 5 lap stint there for Conde. But onto pit road, decided that this is the time to make a pit stop, make that short final pit stop here.
And Francois Bouillon also making a pit stop as well. He's a little bit of a ways in front. Should see him right about here. But right now, both of them making their pit stop just 1 stall away from each other. But Bouillon got into his pit box enough, about 2 or 3 seconds quicker, or sooner I should say, than Conde. So now, well, Conde's out first. I was about to say, now it's just a matter of time on who gets how much fuel. Well, he has 11 seconds for Boulian with 14.3.
So that tells you the difference. Taking that short pit stop compared to a long pit stop right there. Came in behind Conde, but comes out ahead of that car of Francois Boulian. So plenty of two-stoppers going on right now. Your field is starting to sort itself out. Looking at those pit stops. Johnny Gawindi, by the way, 5th place right now, ahead of the 80 car in towards the chicane. And it is a frustrating recovery drive for Johnny here. As we mentioned, pole position sits up. It would have been desperate to have got a good result here, but that damage to the rear of the car on lap 1 in turn 2 of lap 1 has just curtailed his opportunity of getting a good result here.
And hitting that sausage curb there didn't help either, and neither did that corner entry. A little bit loose as well, and well, he didn't hit the sausage curb that much. It was a low enough speed to where that really didn't affect him. It was more of a speed bump, but for John Gindi, that, like you mentioned, is definitely going to be very frustrating, especially since you have at least a maximum of maybe 1 or 2 laps, depending on how long he really can stay out, but I don't know, it's just going to depend. He decides to stay out this time around, so at least it might be 1 lap as Carl Dronke is entering pit road already.
Yep, so from 3rd place, Dronke down onto pit road, taking the pit stop. So this should be, in theory, a shorter pit stop for them. Get that pit stop time up on screen. 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. No, it's a little bit longer, 11.9 seconds. Now, where will Dronke come out here? Onto the power once again. The driver from the New Jersey club out of pit road. Currently residing in 10th place behind Ronan Griffin, who owes us a pit stop. And about 4 seconds behind Anthony Catt, who's one of the drivers who has taken 2 pit stops here. So, kind of in the middle of nowhere here for Dronke, really, because he's got 5 seconds behind Seconde.
On the bright side, he's got no pressure from anybody behind him, so that kind of works out for him, aside from the fact that, well, he's in the middle of absolutely nowhere, so aside from that, though, I think he'll pretty much be all right, if especially since we will be expecting a few pit stops from at least maybe 5 drivers or so. Like you mentioned, Ron Griffin in 9th place. He's 8 laps on his stint. He'll be 9 laps if he decides to stay out, but that includes the entire rest of the top 4, and actually Adonopoulos in 5th place, who's 7 laps on his stint. So this might actually play out to maybe a top 5 for Carl Dronke, depending on how far he is back. About 36.5 seconds back from Greg Zietz. So, yep. Oh, well, Greg Zietz, well, so much for that 9-lap theory.
Yeah, he's decided.
Now is anyone else going? Yeah.
He's decided to pull the trigger. Oh, again, locking up, taking as much speed as possible onto pit road right now. On the speed limit, of course, no pit limiter on these cars, so you have to do it manually. A 50 mile per hour pit lane speed limit here, and this is where we're going to see that quick pit stop. Want to be looking at sub 10 seconds ideally. Oh, over 10 seconds. 11.3 seconds. Away he goes. Now where's Affray? There he is. Affray and goal. Down pit straight. And they're going to see Seitz in front of them as they swap positions again. And Seitz, amazingly, comes out in the lead. Runs wide through turn 1 though. That's going to compromise him. But now 1.4 seconds is the gap here, and that is crucial. It's just on the edge of giving a draft.
It's very close between those two, and of course it will be for the lead once Adonopoulos has to pit road either this time or next time around, because he has absolutely no choice but to go to pit road. So we'll see. In fact, I think even Greg Zietz, he might actually be in the draft of that number 80 machine as well here in a few corners possibly. So that's going to be a little bit of a deal breaker as well for Corley and Alfred if he gets the draft first.
Well, the man who started on the front row, Sasha Gall, really throwing his car at the scenery here, doing everything they can to close that gap to Greg. The man who started this race in third place with Greg Seats. We saw the qualifying lap before him. On the brakes hard once again. Back end wanted to turn, using the braking to rotate the car there into the hairpin. Some people feel more comfortable doing that than others. Right now, Sasha Girl, he's just not quite in that draft yet. Saints, he'll be hoping that he can get past that number 80 car. Oh, because they're staying out here. So your race lead, Adrianopoulos ahead as they're coming across the line, but Saints has got a great slipstream here, Gary, and this is going to be crucial for Gary to clear this number 80 car.
I think you meant Greg there, but yeah, it's going to be very crucial as they go side by side in turn one. A little bit of a position change behind them, but this will bring out Julian Offred and Greg Zietz because Adrianopoulos is a little bit slower than Zietz. That means that they should just barely be able to get the draft behind, and that means as well they should at least be able to be a little bit closer to Greg Zietz and get the slipstream of him when the 80 goes into pit road.
Well, this is the thing though, if Zietz can get a bit of a gap ahead of the 80 car, yeah, they are just closing. They're a second behind now, so Offred behind, getting that gap closed up here. And Zietz will be disappointed that he's given a draft to that 80 car as they're coming into the chicane, and Adrianopoulos putting the pressure on, looking to the inside of Greg to go up the hill once again. Philip Laybear making it another pit stop. Way down your order in 17th at the moment, so we'll have a look at how things pan out once your last pit stops happen. It's really just the car in second place right now that we're waiting for pit stop wise. Over the curb, and all of a sudden that gap has closed right up here through this section, and that is not what Zietz wanted, although getting held up through the hairpin there slightly.
That's a little bit too close for comfort, that's for sure. Man, Julian Offred, a little bit harder on the brakes than he really wanted to be, and like you mentioned, getting held up a little bit, but there goes Adrianopoulos to pit road, so now it's just a matter of how much is the gap between Offred and Zietz, who's already trying to break the draft as he goes down to the far right-hand side, and you see Offred and Gourlay just kind of riding it out, having a little bit of a, not exactly doing much aside from their usual passing that they have been doing, a little bit of a slingshot to get themselves back up. So it's a 1.2 or about 1.3 second gap between second and first. So now it's the cornering speed. I think Gourlay and Offred are just nailed assesses here for sure.
As they come through the right-hander, then look at how wide Offred is going there. Don't want to go too wide there. You can end up with a slowdown penalty if you run too far off into the runoff area. You can see that gap, 1.1 seconds. We've lost Chris Malcolm. Chris Malcolm is out of this race. So disappointment for Chris. He's going no further here in this one. Through the left hairpin now, 1.1 seconds is the gap. So we'll have to see how this one pans out. Here's your standings then, your top 8. Zietz ahead of Goal with Offred in third place. Calvo fourth. Only 4.3 seconds off of the leader. That's not too bad. Anthony Cat fifth place, and then a big gap back to Condé and Boulian. Really close battle between those two, just 0.2 of a second. And then Neil Kemp keeping an eye on those two in 8th place. That's the standings with only to go, 4 laps to go here. So time is running out for these two right here, the 17 and 33, Gary, because these two, they've been working together, swapping positions every lap down the pit straight to give themselves, as you mentioned, that slingshot. It's not quite panning out how they want it to here.
It's not panning out as much as they want to, but it is working just ever so slightly. I still think they're just barely outside of that slipstream as the 17 tries to follow suit behind the 74 and just get whatever is possible, just that small bit of a slipstream. They've closed the gap by at least about 0.2, and for sure heading into this first turn, yeah, there it goes right down into the 0.9. So at this point they're just barely there, but with 3 laps to go right now, it's just a matter of quite literal time and as well as perfection in terms of cornering for sure.
5.5 tenths though. Sasha Gall was faster than your race leader. So Sasha is on a mission right now to catch up this gap to your race leader. So don't count out this battle quite yet. 3 laps to go, as we mentioned, and that gap is progressively coming closer and closer here. So Greg, he is not out of the woods quite yet. We're keeping an eye also on your battle for 6th place, because there's a 3-car train. Condé Bouillard, and also Neil Kemp between the 3 of them. So those 3, they're battling it out there. Pretty close between those guys, but it's your race lead that's been an intriguing one. That strategic battle, but also the teamwork trying to push them forward. Sasha Gall and O'Fray just not quite close enough at the moment, as we'll come back to those 2 right now. But Seitz, he's we'll look back from him. You can see those cars, they have been getting progressively bigger on this rear view.
And that's something that Greg Seitz does not want to see, but I've been thinking and looking back as well at the point standings, how much this could benefit Julian Offra if he does win, because I mean, it's both he and Felipe Bear who are really in the championship battle, of course, not to discredit Diogo Francisco, who I don't believe is here this week. He is not, so this could really benefit in a sense, as well as Greg Seitz. He was 4th place coming into this race, but Julian Alfred, well, it was a pass attempt that was going to happen, but unfortunately a little bit of a miscommunication there, so Alfred will not go to 2nd this time around, but next time around it might be a little bit different.
A little bit of team orders perhaps of, hey, I'm further up the championship. This is a great opportunity to score some big points compared to Philippe Lebert, who, by the way, is down in 18th place. Bouillon and Condé have been going side by side, going through turns 1 and 2. Here they are in turn 3, still side by side. Neil Kemp's dropped off the back of them here, so it's just the 2 of them battling it out for 6th place here into turn 4. Contact between the 2 of them. Bouillon is off in the kitty litter. Neil Kemp. Oh, and I tell you what, I think there's damage there for Condé as well.
Might be. I can't entirely tell, but it might be a little bit of damage, unfortunately, for that 289. But you see on the replay, just slid up, just kind of took it into the corner a little bit too hot, and that just completely probably messed up something on especially the 289, maybe steering or suspension, but definitely getting passed by Neil Kemp right now for the time being.
I'm trying to get a look at the steering when they're on the straight, and yeah, they're struggling to handle it. And look at that, the steering's at about 11 o'clock. They've got damage to the rear suspension, so Condé all of a sudden from being in 6th place, battling it out with Bouillon, is now down to 7th behind Kemp, battling, fighting that damaged car. So disappointing end for them, but right now, the white flag is out here for your race leaders. Across the line they go. As you can see on the graphics there at the top of the screen, final lap of the race. And the 2nd and 3rd are not close enough to take advantage of the slipstream to make any moves. But they are certainly closer as they come through the first 2 corners, but only gained about 1/10 of a second on that last lap, and crucially running wide is Gall, and that's allowing Affray to go look down the inside.
And Julian Affray going to take at least whatever position possible. If he can't get first, he might as well get second, but will Sasha Gall decide to fight back? At least gets right up on the back wing, right very close to it. Very Good camera angle there, a little bit of visualization, seeing at least maybe 2 to 3 feet between the nose cone and the back rear wing, but I don't believe that Alfred could really catch up to Greg Zietz. They're about now 1.5 seconds back, so that set them back a little bit, and this might heavily benefit Greg Zietz from that breakaway that he might have wanted earlier. Well, he's got it for now.
Look at the recovering Johnny Gwindy, by the way. He's caught up to this gaggle of cars all battling it out for 6th place. He could get a top 6 position here if he's lucky. He'll certainly get 1 place here with the damaged Conde and should make his way through. But race leader into the final sector of the lap, a 1.5 second lead over your 2nd and 3rd place. It's been a great drive out at the front for Greg Zietz through the right-hander. Just 3 more corners to come right about now. The left, then the right, and then 1 final right-hander. Get on the power, carry the speed through this final corner. And Greg Zietz then will see the checkered flag and take the win here in the 2K World Cup. What a win. He throws it into the wall in celebration. I mean, that's a bit of an extreme celebration, but still. That's the end of his race, so it doesn't matter. Still battling going on here, though. Gwindy trying to make it through. He's made 2 places on this lap. He's not going to catch up to Bullian, but still, great effort to make it up into 7th place.
Even more amazing fact is that Gustavo Conde was just barely able to hang on to 8th place, even with the damaged suspension. That is absolutely incredible.
Ronald Griffin and Machusinski gonna come across the line absolutely together. Well, those 2 finish in those positions. There's just a couple more battles, and that's Yototas and also Adams. They're battling it out down in 16th and 17th place. Always like to give everybody we can at the end of these races the opportunity to see how their races finish. And it's going to be the number 7 car leading that battle across the line there. But Gary, that was a great race for the strategy call, and also great, just relentless pace from your race winner Greg Zietz.
It's absolutely wonderful for Greg Zietz to keep that momentum up throughout pretty much the entire race. Ever since he got into the lead and had that little bit of a breakaway from those early pit stops, he really capitalized on that pretty much ever since those early opening laps.
Here we go then. Official results then up on screen. And it is Greg Zietz then who wins this one, 1.5 seconds ahead of Julien Affray, with Sasha Gall rounding out your podium positions. Gonzalo Calvo got pretty close towards the end there in 4th, with Anthony Catt a lonely 5th place for them. Then we saw that battle between Francois Bullian, able to get 6th place ahead of the recovering Johnny Gwindy in 7th. Gustavo Conde, damaged car in 8th, with Neil Kemp rounded out in 9th, and then Idenopoulos rounded out your top 10. Karl Dromke 11th, and then Ronan Griffin and Matt Choshinsky came out together, just 1/10 of a second between those 2 at the line. Simon Edwards in 14th place, caught up in your first lap issues, along with, well, you know, Trout Tran, and then Haroldas Jutikas and Rob Adams. Philip Leibert, another one who got caught up in your first lap shenanigans, in 18th. That's your championship leader right there, finishing in 18th. Andy Witt in 19th, with John Ocken 1 lap down in 20th. And then your drivers who did not finish, Chris Malcolm and John Sully. So what we will do is we will grab a word with your race leader, race winner, and Gary is there with Greg.
And here with Greg Zietz once again showing up more domination. The third win this season, 2nd win in a row. So really no stranger to victory lane so far for the 3rd time this season. How is this track out here handling? How's the car, I should say, for this 2.89 mile track here today?
Yeah, I was really happy with the way the car was. I was a little bit surprised. I saw Sasha pit very early, and I knew his teammate Julian was pitting with him. So I thought I was in deep trouble because unfortunately my teammates didn't qualify up front with me, so I had no help. So yeah, I'm actually really surprised I ended up holding on there.
Especially coming down to the ending of the race, how crucial really was it for those pit stops? Because even though, well, they were all just fuel only, was there any little bit of worry at least that you might lock up the tires a little bit more or maybe slide down on the pit road rather than having a smooth entry?
Yeah, I was a little careful. I had to play that kind of line between a little too careful and a little too eager, and I think I got it just about right. So, yeah, I was a bit nervous going in, especially in the second pit. I saw that, my pace was at least as good or better than them, so I figured that they had taken less fuel on their earlier pit stop, so I expected the gap to come down, but I had no idea if I was going to come out ahead or behind them, and luckily came out just outside their draft range, and then lap traffic, or not really lap traffic at that point, but another car kind of got into that gap, and I was like, oh no, that just basically made a bridge for their for their draft, and so I thought I was in big trouble at that point too. So I just basically pushed and tried to run qualifying laps from that point to the end of the race.
Well, luckily that did turn out into a little bit of a favor as well. So before we go ahead and let you go, any thoughts for Sebring next weekend? Anyone that you like to shout out?
No, Sebring's always a fun race. Should be really good and competitive there. And then just for shout-outs, my team, of course, TT Racing, and Philippe for putting on the league, and you guys for providing the broadcast. And by the way, Gary, I have to correct you on my last name since it's Seitz.
Oh, man. Man, I've been hearing multiple pronunciations, so I was not sure. It's either Zeitz or Seitz.
There's like 2 or 3 different ways people seem to pronounce it, but it's Seitz.
I remember that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
Well, there we go. Race winner in the booth with us here. And, well, Gary, I mean, we'll sort of sum up that race for us today, because it was a shame that we had that accident early on that took out a few of your drivers who didn't get a qualifying lap time in. But that's the penalty that you get for not timing your qualifying laps right.
Yeah, it's really just unfortunate, especially since there's so many cars and so many, not exactly lanes, but more just all over the racetrack using every single space possible. So it's kind of the downside, really, and the bad luck that you really run into. But you just have to hope for the best and move on to the next week.
Of course, you mentioned it then, Sebring. I mean, that is such a fun circuit, and a challenging circuit again, and a long circuit as well for these cars. Again, it'll be a strategic battle, but a lot of slipstreaming and draft coming into effect once again.
It's going to be a little bit of, not exactly a copy of what we saw here, but more a little bit of a variation, I should say, because, well, that track, the international layout from what I'm looking at, my goodness, that's going to be definitely really an interesting beast for these Skip Barbers to tackle.
Well, we will see how they go on next week. Of course, don't forget, next week it is 2K World Cup from Sebring. Make sure you join us. Usual time, usual place, RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. And if you want more Skip Barber action, then tomorrow evening, make sure you join RaceSpot TV on the RaceSpot TV channel for the UK and Ireland Monday Night Skippies. Make sure you join Rachel and Linus for that action. But from ourselves here today, I have been Paul Smith along with Gary Weaver in the commentary booth. And from everybody who is behind the scenes at RaceSpot TV, we wish you a fond farewell and good evening.